Hello guys and welcome to the predictions and preview of Europa League quarterfinal stage matches in 2020. But before we start, let's just start by talking about the match we saw yesterday night. One of the best games that I've seen in a long time. We're talking about the Manchester City versus Real Madrid round of 16 match in the Champions League. And maybe the drift or the gap between the quality of the teams that play in the Europa League and the Champions League was clearly visible. We'll definitely be talking about the quarterfinal stages of the Champions League matches, but that's another video. Wait for that. Now let's get started. So before we start with the first match, let me just thank you for all the love that you guys have shown me. It's just not in the YouTube space, but we had a good long discussions even on Twitter and some other football forums about the Europa League matches and the round of 16 matches, at which I made a video, and you can actually find the link in the description. Also, let's start with the Manchester United versus Copenhagen match. We knew that Manchester United was not going to field the full team, and once their main players, some of them at least, was actually introduced in the later stages of the match against Lazio, we saw that there's a visible drift in the quality when the first team players are playing. And I think they'll be their full squad when they'll be taking on Copenhagen, because surprisingly Copenhagen played a brilliant match, because most of us expected or predicted that Istanbul Başakşehir is going to win that match. They had the confidence going, being the Turkish champions and so on. They've already qualified for the Champions League for next season, but Copenhagen had a very clear plan. And when we were actually talking and discussing about the round of 16 match, actually one person, I don't remember his name, but he said a very valid point, because in the match, the first leg which happened in Turkey, Copenhagen was almost playing with 10 men from about 30 minutes or so. That means for most of the part, at least for 2/3 of the match, they were playing with just 10 men, and they managed to just keep the lead to the minimum. So that point actually was pretty valid, that they made their plans pretty well. And when you compare with the big teams like the Inter Milan or the Manchester United, a team like Copenhagen would take the Europa League more seriously, because usually the big teams are expected to win and they are expected to play even in the Champions League and so on. But for the smaller teams like Copenhagen, winning the Europa League is actually a big deal. And remember, none of the Danish sides has actually even made it to the final of any European top flight football tournament. So Copenhagen would love to be there. United is a team which backs plenty of energy. They're a strong team which has pace, and now they're gelling in well. I mean, the combination links, the plays are actually coming off, it's paying off. But if they can manage the back lane well, I think Copenhagen match won't be a big deal. But Copenhagen is going to make sure that there are no pushovers, because like I said, I mentioned earlier, because a team like Copenhagen, it means a lot more for them if they can reach the semifinals or reach the finals or even win it, because that's going to change their entire history. It's going to be big. Just imagine becoming the first Danish team to do so. So there are things at stake, and they want this tournament and win more than anything else. The second match of the night, which is Inter Milan taking on Bayer Leverkusen, that will be the match, I think, where the strategy and tactics will play a huge role. Yes, we understand maybe most of the people are saying that Inter Milan should be the favorites to win this match. But again, Bayer Leverkusen is not a bad side at all. They have some very interesting prospects in their lineup. The likes of Kai Havertz, he had a good game. What I saw in that game was, he has this knack of maybe lofting the ball over the line of defenders, the last line of defenders, and trying to find their target man or a player who can actually finish the goal, which is a very useful skill, because usually what we see is the playmakers, the ones who provide the assist, will be good at actually splitting the defense. But Ronaldinho used to do this brilliant stuff called lofting the ball over the players and actually finding perfectly. That has to be very precise. But if this guy, he's a youngster, if he can practice and perfect that, that's gonna elevate his game to a whole new level. It's gonna be pretty interesting. Now, let's talk about Inter Milan. The Inter Milan Getafe game was a pretty good game, given the fact that Getafe played a good match. They played well, they linked up well, and they were very challenging. It was not as if Inter Milan is going to run through them. Romelu Lukaku scored another goal in Europa League. That happens to be his 8th goal in consecutive matches in Europa League. And if we can score another goal in the quarterfinals, that would take his tally to 9 consecutive games and equal the record of Alan Shearer, who actually scored 11 goals in 9 games in 2005. So much for records. But what I liked about the Lukaku goal was the fact that this guy is pretty strong, because he made sure, the Getafe defender was trying to knock him off, but this guy is strong as a mountain. You can't nudge him off. He stood his ground, controlled the ball, and the finish was actually a very neat one. He made it look easy, but that's a difficult skill. And also because he's a very strong man, defenders will have a tough time actually knocking him off the ball. And if they manage to do it, that will look like a pretty ugly foul. And in the penalty box, nowadays, well, let's not talk about that. So the physical presence of Romelu Lukaku is going to be a huge advantage for Inter Milan, who has been on an excellent form since the game restarted from the Serie A matches after the COVID break. For the second quarterfinal, which is Inter Milan versus Bayer Leverkusen, we talked about how important the strategy and the tactics of the team is going to be. But remember, both those teams, the Inter Milan and Bayer Leverkusen, they have some big names in their lineup. So they will actually make the job of the managers a little easier. But this game, the third quarterfinal, which is Shakhtar Donetsk versus FC Basel, that is going to be the battle of the managers. They have to get the team playing as a unit, and they have to get it right to the team. So talking about Shakhtar Donetsk, if you look at the score sheet, it says 3-0 against Wolfsburg. All the 3 goals actually came very late, to be precise, after the 89th minute. Yes, they managed to score 3 before the game was over, but there were plenty of chinks in the armor of Shakhtar Donetsk, and they cannot manage to do that against the Basel side, which is looking defensively extremely rock solid. So that was the point when I said the managers has to get their tactics and strategies perfectly right. Because if you look at the Basel team's record defensively, they haven't conceded a single goal in the last 5 matches. And since the knockout stages started, they have scored 4 goals each in both the ties. So they're pretty good scoring goals to make sure that they win, but their strength comes from their backline. They are defensively extremely good. And the Ukrainian side will have to do a lot better than what they managed to do against the Wolfsburg if they are to break down the defense of the Swiss side. And remember, other than Copenhagen, the Swiss side is the only team yet to reach a final of a European final, and they would love to change this. Now to the last quarterfinal match, which is a mouth-watering tie. I probably think this is going to be the best match to actually, as a neutral fan, if you're enjoying the sport, I think this is going to be the best game. It is Sevilla against the Wolves. Did we say that, Sevilla is a different team when it's playing in the Europa League? But also look at the La Liga season. They were defensively pretty straightforward because they had the 3rd best defense in La Liga this season. And the attacking force is actually looking smooth as butter. I really like the way Sergio Reguilon is playing, who was voted the best left back in this year's La Liga. And he's also linked to a move to many Premier League teams. I don't know if he's going to play for Chelsea next season. We'll find out. But also the fact that, the Argentine Ocampos had a fantastic game and is looking smooth. And all credit to him for not actually falling over in the penalty box, because when he was actually assisting for the second goal, I thought that any other player would have just gone down and gone for the penalty, but he stayed on his feet and made sure that he crossed the ball because he believed that there's always a chance. So that I like that factor. So having a good defense obviously helps, but people like Reguilon and Ocampos, Sevilla is a tough nut to crack, especially in Europa. Given that they have this kind of belief that they can go extremely deep and maybe win this. And also the record is in their favor. Now talking about Wolves is getting support from a lot of corners, maybe because of the brand of football they play. They play fearless football. I don't think there is another team in this quarterfinal stage which is as fearless as Wolves is, because there are better teams. Let's say Manchester United is looking even sharper, Sevilla, Inter Milan and the likes are there, but they're not as fearless as Wolves is. Wolves, they're playing with so much freedom and they think that there is nothing to lose, and yes, they only have things to gain from this tie, because if they manage to win the title, then that is their gate or doorway to play in Europe next season. And Wolves has been brilliant this time around. Remember, they did not have a great game, but the game against Olympiacos was so much fun to watch. It was one of the best matches of the round of 16 second leg. Also because Olympiacos played pretty well, because both teams created so much chances and they looked like they're going to score. Both the teams in both the ends, they look like they're going to score more goals. And we saw some amazing saves, especially from Rui Patricio, who is looking confident between the poles. So the performance of the goalkeeper Rui Patricio is going to give a lot of confidence to the Wolves team, who I don't think will be intimidated with the strength or the power or the fact that Sevilla has won the maximum number of Europa League titles. They will be taking on Sevilla head on. So before we wrap it up, let's take a look at how I think these teams are going to play and who is going to go through to the semi-finals of Europa League. In the round of 16, actually, we got only one wrong, which was the Copenhagen match. I thought Istanbul was going to go through, but Copenhagen deserved. They played the better match, actually, football on the night. Now, the first quarterfinal. Copenhagen will be hungry. They will be taking this Europa League more seriously. There were even talks in the media about United actually focusing on the Champions League next season and taking it lightly. I don't know, but I think United will go through. In the second match, I think Inter Milan is going to look sharper than how they looked in the round of 16 match, and I think they'll be a little heavy for Bayer Leverkusen to overcome. I think Inter Milan will win that game quite comfortably as well. Shakhtar Donetsk versus Basel is probably the most difficult match to predict. We never know how these teams are going to play. And Donetsk is actually a team which has plenty of Brazilian flair and presence in them. The pundits are actually predicting a Shakhtar Donetsk will go through to the semi-finals. I think that's going to be a great game. It's almost a 50-50. But somehow my heart is going with FC Basel, because they're defensively very strong. Shakhtar will test their defense for sure, but I think maybe they will find an odd goal or two and should be making it to the semi-finals. That's going to be a tight one. Shakhtar looks like a very strong team, and my brain is saying maybe Shakhtar will go through, but my heart is going with FC Basel. Now to the most talked about tie, which is Sevilla versus Wolves. Wolves is gonna go and play a brilliant match, but I think Sevilla is going to be too strong. The rift between the teams is going to be very clear, and I think Sevilla will win the match with a lot of flair. So this time I'll also be making a preview and predictions video for the quarterfinals of Champions League as well, after tonight's round of 16 matches as well. And also there was a suggestions that I should just talk a bit about the games after they are done. So I think watch the comment space. But please feel free to talk about your predictions. I would love to read your comments. So let us know who you think is going to go through, and you can always predict the scoreline as well. I love to read your comments. So thank you so much for supporting my video, and we'll meet again for the Champions League video. So until next time, this is Radio Baba signing off. Over and out. If you look at the history, especially in the last decade, spare Porto in 2010-2011, all the teams that won the Europa League were either from Spain or from England.